Blog Talk Radio.
Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen, across the airwaves. We just finished the Talking Candid podcast. The guest in there was Claudio Rossono. He wrote the book, if you want to get a hold of that one, Lead from the Heart Up, Not the Neck Up, How to Create a Positive Winning Culture on the Field in the Office. So check that out, Claudio Rossono. As we land in Cleveland, Ohio now, it's the American Sports History Podcast, hosted by my good friend, brother, mentor, Peter Ray. Yours truly, Mark Mancini, producing it. 347-205-9631. You can catch the archive version on blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports podcast platforms, wherever you subscribe to, powered now by Mancini Media. So without further ado, let me lay the red carpet down, put the podium in its place, hand off the mic. First of all, Peter, how are you? Second of all, how can people get a hold of you? Third of all, boy, I'll tell you, every 2 weeks I look forward to this. It's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Hi, Mark. I'm doing well. I have a YouTube channel. It's my name. History videos we make on it's Peter J. Ray, REA. I'm on Facebook. People can send me a friend request. And tonight, you're absolutely right. Tonight's guest played in the NBA from 1980 to 1995 with the Seattle Supersonics, San Diego Clippers, LA Clippers, Dallas Mavericks, New York Knicks, and Utah Jazz. He has a book out, came out last year, Celebrating Your Gift of Life, From the Verge of Suicide to a Life of Purpose and Joy. And he's just got a new podcast on the Mark Mancini Network, started this past Saturday morning. Standing Above the Crowd, 10 a.m. Pacific time. He had Lenny Wilkins on for the 10th time. Welcome to the show, Mr. James Donaldson.
Hey, Peter Ray. All right, Mark Mancini. This is our little team, I tell you. Every couple of weeks, it's so great to bring it back together and go out and do another great show. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. The topic is NBA past and present and mental health. Now, I'd like to read again from moving through your book, Chapter 7. If I'd gone through with it. I know it's kind of gruesome to think about, but one thing most people want to know, if someone does take their own life, is how they did it. Usually the how is part of the stigma and cover-up we don't talk about. There are lots of ways to end one's life. I'm not going to go into all of them and give anyone any ideas they haven't already thought of, but I will discuss the three methods I considered. Before I do, let me clarify that all my life I've really prided myself on living a healthy lifestyle and being in good health. I never in any way abused my body. I have never, ever smoked a cigarette, smoked a joint, drank a drop of alcohol, or done any illegal drugs. That has been my choice. When I was 10, I remember returning home from school one day when one of my favorite uncles was visiting us. There he was, sprawled out on our living room sofa, reeking from alcohol and totally incoherent. I promised myself then that will never happen to me. It's been a choice for me ever since not to abuse my body. I even went to the #1 drinking and partying school in the late 1970s, Washington State University, and abstained. All of my friends could not wait to drink. Some of them would even begin on Thursday afternoon, getting sloshed for the weekend. The drinking age was 21 in Washington, but just 8 miles away. Over the border was Moscow, Idaho, where the drinking age was 18. A caravan of cars full of WSU students would head over there every weekend to have a good time. My friends would beg and plead with me to go with them, but I never did. I had promised myself at age 10 never to lose control of myself due to drugs or alcohol. I've kept that promise all these years, and I plan to continue keeping it for the rest of my life. In China, it's the custom to drink alcohol with meals, especially during business lunches when deals are made. The rice wine flows freely, and everyone around the table will drink shots left and right, and finally, after dinner, stagger home. I've never engaged in that. I told my Chinese friends when I first started going to China that I didn't drink, smoke, or do drugs, and I'm vegetarian on top of that. They thought I was some type of Buddhist monk, but I told them it's just my personal preference for how I live my life. After trying to pressure me a little, they have all learned to respect my choice, and even though I feel like the odd man out every time the rice wine starts flowing, I'm able to hang on to my dignity and sense of myself. My vegetarian diet, which I've observed for more than 35 years, also throws off my Chinese friends. the newly affluent Chinese do not hesitate in rolling out mounds of different types of meat for every meal. It's another custom I just don't partake in, so they always manage to have a little vegetarian fare for me. Any comments, Mr. Donaldson?
Well, I think it's great for our listeners out there, especially the younger ones who are under that tremendous peer pressure to go along, to get along, and just kind of be part of what's happening out there, to be able to have some sense of dignity and some fortitude about yourself and stand for something. There's the old saying, you stand for something or you fall for anything. And you have to have some personal beliefs and personal convictions that you just really stand for no matter what. And it's not that I have a fear of losing control of myself, but, you know, under the influence of alcohol and drugs, that's the slippery slope that begins. And before you know it, it becomes a habit, and then it's something you're doing every few days throughout the week, and becomes habitual, becomes problematic. And so I just never wanted to get on that greasy downward slope and said, no, I'm not going to do that. People respect me, I think, even more so because I do have some serious convictions about me and about my life. I don't hold judgment over anybody else. They do what they do, and I do what I do, and everybody's fine, you know, even during the awkward moments when they're getting sloshed and I'm sitting there, you know, teetotaling and doing those kind of things. They still look at me and say, wow, you know, I think inside I can sense that they feel like, wow, I wish I could be more like James, but the pressure is too great to have to do what I'm doing right now. So you young people out there, hang on to your convictions. If it's waiting until after marriage for, you know, sex, and I know it's an old-fashioned mores in this day and age, but still some people do have those convictions to hang on and wait until after marriage for sex and babies and all the other things. Young people especially, that's really what I wrote that for in my book, to remind folks that, hey, you know, all of us have different things that we indulge in, but just if you're going to indulge, do it in moderation. And if it's something that's going to cause a slippery slope, don't even get started.
Tom from Warren, Ohio, called in and said he heard your show on Saturday, James. It says you're a natural, and he says he loves listening to this show every 2 weeks. Thank
you, Tom. Yeah, well, you know, I've done so many interviews over the years, and especially the last year or two with my book being out, talking about mental health and suicide prevention. I'm on all kind of podcasts, all kind of radio shows, TV shows, articles, and I talk and talk and talk, and so it is kind of a natural. I've hosted, kind of a guest host, some radio shows periodically through the years, so I'm not totally foreign to it. And of course, having a great guest on like Lenny Wilkens, you know, my first NBA coach. Oh, that was a home run from the start, and Lenny was just wonderful to just go and talk about his early growing up years, his coaching years, his basketball playing years, his military life. He had a great story to share for all of us.
I loved, I was working, but I listened to the show after. I loved hearing you talk with Lenny Wilkens, because he was an early Cavalier. He coached a team, Cavs team in the late 80s. They were a very strong contender, and he's very beloved here in Cleveland. I loved hearing, and you know, really one of the, talk about NBA history. Incredible. We got Alex from Bellevue, Washington. He says the Lenny Wilkens interview was amazing, one of the best coaches here in Seattle history, hoping to get the Supersonics back. He says, hey, James, I heard you mention Fred Downtown Brown this past Saturday. How is he along with Slick Watts?
Yeah, Fred is doing great. Fred's retired now from he went into banking after his basketball careers with the old, if you're from Bellevue, Seattle, you know the old Seafirst banks. So Fred was with them for years until they got bought out by Bank of America. And now he is living a life of, you know, luxury and retirement, I'm sure, up in Mercer Island. Slick Watts, unfortunately, had a major stroke about a year ago. And he's still incapacitated quite a bit. He can't walk on his own. He can't really speak. But, you know, I'm going to try to get him as a guest, and his son, Donald Watts, would come on with him and be able to answer the questions that Slick is, you know, if Slick can utter a few words, it'd be great to hear from him. If he can't, Donald will be prepared to speak for Slick, and I think that's going to be a tremendous show. the love for Slick Watts around Seattle for 45 years. This guy has just been so beloved, and he gave so much of himself to the community. We miss him because he was such a lively, charismatic, friendly, happy-go-lucky guy around town, and everybody loves Slick Watts. So we do want to hear from him.
Continuing with your book, you've got to have some convictions that you'll stick to no matter what, and that's how I've lived my life. I make this point about health and convictions because in terms of ways I considered committing suicide, I had no alcohol or drugs of any kind in my house to overdose on. I am also not a gun owner. I had to rule out these typical methods of suicide unless I chose to go through the extra effort of developing a serious and sudden drug or alcohol problem and buying a gun. Just having to make that transition from my normal life gave me pause enough to stop me from acting impulsively and doing something I would later regret. However, in my garage's rafters, I had curled up a rope about 30 feet long and 3/4 of an inch thick. It had been up there for 20 years at least. Every day when I drove into my garage, I'd glance up to see the rope coiled there and note all the places I could easily loop the rope over before tying it around my neck and kicking the chair out from underneath me. That was my preferred method if I was going to do harm to myself. The second method was also hanging from the same rafters. It was several feet of rubber tubing about 4 inches in diameter, which was used as a sump pump that I periodically drained my hot tub with. It, too, had sat up there for several years. My thought was to attach one end of the hose to my exhaust pipe, crack the car window, and put the other end in it. All of the other windows would be closed, and I would close the garage door behind me, start the car, and sit in it waiting for carbon monoxide to take my life. I don't know anything about that method other than the things I've heard or seen very briefly, so I had no idea how long it might take. Would I be suffering in agony or peacefully fall asleep? I didn't know, and I wasn't in any hurry to find out. The third and final way I was thinking about ending my life was suicide by cop. Being a very large and tall African-American man makes it much more difficult for me to get out of a situation involving law enforcement alive. Even though I have a lot of personal friends in the Seattle Police Department, my thought was to go up to a police officer and wrestle him for his gun. I was certain either he or one of his partners would shoot me dead on the spot. Not shoot to wound, but shoot to kill. As we have seen in so many examples around this country during our lifetimes, if I were white, I might be given the benefit of the doubt. But as an African-American man, I have witnessed and experienced the racist attitudes and prejudice that persist in this country that every person of color puts up with each and every day. I knew messing with a cop's gun was a sure way out of this life if I chose it. I hate to think that because, as I mentioned, I have several friends who are Seattle police officers. They're wonderful people. But I've always wondered why, when an African-American man is shot by a police officer in this country, he isn't just wounded in his leg, arm, or shoulder. Instead, he is usually shot multiple times to ensure he is dead. That has always bothered me, and it still does. I'm just happy that I didn't have to find out for myself to prove my point. Any comments, Mr. Donaldson?
Wow, you're bringing back a lot of emotions right now. Of those ways I was thinking about exiting this world. I've since learned that, police officers, they're trained to shoot for center mass of your body. Hopefully not lethally, but that's the center mass. All your organs and your arteries and your heart and everything else are right there. And that's what they're aiming for. They're not aiming for your shoulder or your arm or your leg. And that's just the training they have. Unfortunately, many times that is a lethal way of being shot, and you don't get a lot of chances with that. So I thought about those ways of committing suicide and getting out of this world. And I've come to realize also when you're in that place, that mental state of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, you're not in your right frame of mind. No time at all had I ever thought about going up and wrestling with a police officer to take his gun to get shot. I'd never, ever had that thought in my 60 years prior to this and ever since I came out of my depression. So in that terrible state of mind, you think all kind of crazy things. And we just have to make sure that we can reach out to people who can help balance us, help bring us back into reality, give us a proper and healthy perspective on what's going on with us. I've been working with these 2 or 3 men throughout the holidays as well, and they the same way. They're not in the right frame of mind. They just feel the world's against them. They feel like there's no hope, there's no tomorrow, there's no sense on going on. And I keep trying to encourage them. I say, hey guys, I was right where you were 3 years ago, and I worked my way through that. You'll work your way through that too. So we all need to be there for each other, Peter, and that's the essence of what my book is all about, to share what I went through, even here it is 4 years later, and it still brings me to tears and emotions. That's how real it was, and so that's why I wrote my book.
Eric from Springfield, Illinois says, hello, Cleveland. Peter and James, more popular than the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I like talking about life. I mean, we can Google sports stuff all day long. Tom Brady just retired yesterday officially, so we can see all these sports stories all day. But talking about real life, what affects each and every one of us, is really what I'm all about. So I really appreciate you, Peter, for giving me this platform to be able to do that.
Oh, I'm so grateful that we're having these shows every 2 weeks. Continuing with your book, so those were the 3 ways I seriously contemplated ending my life. The first 2 methods often left me with a pit in the bottom of my stomach when I thought about how long it might take for someone to discover my body. I live in a house set off from the street a good 50 feet or so, as are all the other houses in the neighborhood. Plus, I have frosted plate glass windows near the front door, and once I close my garage door, you can't really tell I'm home. There might be a light on or two, but that's really no big indication of whether I'm home or not. I've always had lights set to timers that come on and off. It was always normal for me to stay in the house for 2 or 3 days in a row since I didn't feel like going to the gym every day anymore. I mentioned these 3 ways of ending my life to both my family doctor and my mental health professional friend, Chuck Wright. The first thing my doctor told me was to make sure I got rid of that coil of rope in my rafters, and he couldn't stress enough that I should not dilly-dally but go straight home after my appointment and remove the rope and give it to one of my neighbors or friends. I did just that. I took it down and put it in a large plastic garbage bag. Then I gave it to Chuck. Chuck still has that rope to this day. Chuck told me that my concern over how people would discover my body gave me a sense of hope in itself that I was seriously lacking at the time. He breathed a sigh of relief when I told him that was my concern. One thing we need to look for in anybody with suicidal ideations is that faint glimmer of hope that just might still be there. It might be a simple thing like wondering who's going to take care of my pet, who's going to take in the mail, who's going to water the plants. When someone is dealing with suicidal ideations, they're not thinking too far beyond themselves, but they do care about those things close to them, such as pets and favorite plants. I'm so glad I made it past that point. I was overcome at that time by impulsiveness. I've never been impulsive in my life. I've always been very thoughtful, methodical, and purposeful as I think things through. But when that impulsiveness became part of my mindset, I would hear a little voice in my head telling me, go ahead and do it. Do it now. You've already planned it out. Just go ahead and do it. That was scary. It was difficult not only to get that voice to quiet down and go away, but to actually resist the urge to act before I could think. That was probably the scariest time when I was working my way out of the depths. I encourage you, no matter what your preferred means of ending your life may be, to think twice, to think thrice, and keep thinking. Don't give in to the impulsive nature that comes over us when we are in that place. If you have a gun around the house, get rid of it. If you have alcohol around the house, get rid of it. If you have drugs around the house, get rid of them. If you have a coil of rope hanging up in your rafters, get rid of it. If nothing else, you can have a close friend or neighbor hang on to those possessions until you've worked your way back to a healthy state of mind. For me, all I do is think about how glad I am I didn't end up killing myself.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about the young Miss USA who committed suicide in New York City just a day or so ago, and it made headline news all over. Only 30 years old. She wrote in her diary and to her note to her friends that she's 30 years old. She's running out of time to make a name for herself, to make a mark in this world. And that's just a shameful, like I said, you're not in your right frame of mind when you're in that frame of mind of depression and suicidal and ideations. And the way that all the news media all of a sudden is out there trying to write her story for her, that's the other thing that really kept me around, was the fact that one of my at my alma mater, Washington State University, one of the student athletes, Tyler Helinski, killed himself in January 2018. The quarterback, the soon-to-be starting quarterback for the football team, and he killed himself on campus. And the same thing, the next few days, everybody's out there trying to write Tyler's story for him. And I told myself, and I said even yesterday after Miss USA killed herself, everyone's trying to tell her story. This is why I wanted to stick around, so I could tell my story. Nobody can tell your story better than you can. And I'm so glad, and I thank God every single day that I'm still here. After I went through all of that, I'm back to a point where I'm just so thankful, so grateful I made it through, and I can continue sharing and telling my story.
Yeah, I like what you said about wanting to tell your story, and because I know if I had died in recent years, there are people in my family who would tell the story of my life, and it wouldn't be a very good story. So, because of their negative attitude about me. Renee from Alvin, Texas. James, keep telling your story. It's heartwarming. You and Peter always bring love to this network on Tuesdays.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Renee. Yeah, that's what we're all about. You know, the world is so full of negativity and all these depressing tensions back and forth of every sort. We need to find those little spots and sparkles of light out there that continue to give out positive vibrations to everybody, and let everybody know that the world hasn't gone to hell in a handbasket quite yet. There are still glimmers of hope, and sometimes we have to look a little harder to find it, but it's out there. Find it and then gravitate to it and hang on to it.
Mitchell from Dearborn, Michigan. Faith and hope. Thank you to you both each and every week.
Thank you so much, Mitchell. Thank you. And we hope we're helping other folks out there. If it's not you, the listener, maybe you, the listener, knows people who are struggling with different things. And now you can go back better equipped, better armed to say, hey, I'm just going to be a listening and supportive person in your life to help you through the difficult time that you're going through.
Sheila from Brooklyn, New York. James, I heard about that. She's talking about this young lady who committed suicide. Can't understand why she would do that, everything she had at her feet.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And you know, I blogged about it today, and I said, you know, here's a person that seemingly has everything in the world that she's worked for. A beautiful young lady, young, just Miss USA. She's done so much already, and she's only 30 years old. She's got 60, 70 years to go. Why snuff out your life at this point? This is one of the things I'll talk about with George Raveling this coming Saturday. George told me it wasn't until he was 62 years old that he got his big break in life. He had coached for 40 years, but now he got the big break at 62 to go work with Nike USA, Nike Global, and that's what he's been doing the last 20 years. And so he told me, and I wasn't even 60 years old yet when I was going through my difficulties. And George told me, he's like, James, you haven't even begun to live yet. You know, you're just 60 years old. My big break didn't come till I was 62. You have to hang in there, and I'm not going to let you quit.
Yeah, I like the part in the title of your book, from the end of the title, to a life of purpose and joy. You know, when people are depressed, and a lot of people, maybe they're not really depressed, but they're sort of living a sort of their life, they're kind of bored or whatever, and we really need to take control of our lives and see what can we do to change our lifestyle and to eat better, to you know, I need to exercise more, and you know, and you talked about how the world can get crazy, but you know, God is here. He is here, and that's never going to change. And so, and if we make the effort, we can feel God's presence and see God here. There is beauty here, and there is evil for sure. But anyway, I like that it's not just overcoming depression; it's living it's working toward a joyful life.
That's right. That's right. And Peter, it all begins with you, with us individually. It all begins inside ourselves to say, okay, Today's going to be a good, positive, uplifting day. And it's a choice that we make. Do we start out negative or positive? We see the glass half full or half empty. Those are all choices we make that set our perception about life right from that moment. And so much of it begins with us. And if we don't love ourselves, we don't acknowledge ourselves, we don't respect ourselves, it's going to be very difficult to move forward in a positive manner throughout the rest of life. So that's where it begins. We got to love ourselves first, and then we can love others.
Albert from Poway, love that saying by George Raveling, not going to let you quit.
That's right. Oh, yeah. George is an old school coach. And back in the 70s when I played for him at Washington State, he was one of those old school coaches that would scream and rant and rave and cuss you out in front of everybody. They don't do that anymore. And George, he reamed me out several times on the phone when he called me to check on me and my mental state. And he said, James, I'm not going to let you sit around the house feel sorry for yourself. Just like when he was coaching me. I'm not going to let you quit. I've known you for 45 years since you were in high school. You've come too far to give up now. We've come too far to give up now. I'm not going to let you quit. And that's some of the most reassuring words that anybody could have told me. It was tough love, but I needed it at that time, and it kept me going on, if nothing else, for George Raveling, not for myself at that point. Now it's for me, and I can pay it back to George.
And it showed he cared about you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I met George when I was in high school, as a senior in high school, 18 years old, getting ready to go to Washington State University. I was just a kid, and he took the mantle he took the baton from my own dad, and they passed the baton between themselves and said, okay, George, now you got him, and you go up and you shape him to the man he's going to be. And that's what George Raveling means to me. Those 4 years I spent with him at Washington State were the most instrumental, fundamental years of my life, and it made me the person I am now.
That's wonderful. Now we have a little bit of time here. We've been talking about NBA top 50 players that you played with. Michael Jordan.
Oh, wow. What can you say? I mean, to me, he is, if he's not the greatest player ever, he's in my top two. Because being a big guy, I like to go with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, being my GOAT. But Michael, for all-around player, playing almost every position on the floor, attacking the rim, playing defense, doing all the things it took, and also being a winner. He wasn't a winner his first 3 or 4 years in the league. He was a leading scorer in the league, but he wasn't a winner until he got past the Boston Celtics, and then he got past the Detroit Pistons, and then they beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then they started off on their 6th championship run, with Michael taking a couple years off for baseball and came back and won 3 more. Absolutely phenomenal what the body of work that Michael Jordan put together. So I can't quite give him the full nod because I love Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and his body of work. But those are my top two, GOAT A and GOAT B.
Yeah, I think with Jordan, his drive to win NBA championships, he was just driven. And you see, we have to look at that and apply it to our own lives, to be driven to be champions in life, to be winners in life, and have that. He channeled it into winning the NBA titles. We need to do the same, be inspired by that, to do that in our own lives.
And also overcoming adversity. Remember, back when he was in junior high school, he got cut from his junior high basketball team. And that really set the stage for going out and proving to people over and over for the next 20 years that he was the best and the greatest basketball player on the court. And that's what really motivated him more than anything, being cut back in junior high school. So remember that, all of our young people out there listening, just because you lose a job and you're only 22 years old, it might be setting you up for greatness down the road. So keep on hanging in there.
The time has passed. Do you have any final words for our audience tonight, Mr. James Donaldson?
Yes. Well, thank you, Peter. And, I really appreciate you reading small excerpts out of my book. I would love it if folks pick up a copy, pick it up directly from me. I'll sign a nice little inscription in there to you personally. You can pick that up at celebratingyourgiftoflife.com, my website. And right there, they got a PayPal button. Just click it and put your order in. It comes directly to me. I whip out a book, put my Sharpie on it, and drop it in the mail to you within a couple of days. So that's the best way to get a copy of Celebrating Your Gift of Life. And I think it's going to help everybody because I lay myself out there to be as vulnerable and open and candid as possible. And it's a great read, great story, and a triumphant in the end, because here I am now living that life of purpose and joy all over again.
We spoke on the phone last couple of weeks recently, and we've been having this show every 2 weeks, but but you and I both want to do it, so we're both committed. So listeners, we're going to have the show. James Donaldson will be back in 2 weeks. That's going to be the 15th of February, and so I'm really happy. I'm committed to. What a tremendous opportunity for me, and I'm so happy that you want to be on. And it's so anyway. That's in my own mind, we didn't really have it finalized. So so anyway, for the listeners who were wondering, and so anyway, I'm very happy, so happy about that we're going to be.
Well, as I sign off in my book, Peter. Go out and live life abundantly, okay? Just like God wants us to live. Live it abundantly. He gave us this precious gift of life. Don't throw it away. Live it to its fullest and live it abundantly.
Our guest has been Mr. James Donaldson, former NBA player and author of the book Celebrating Your Gift of Life, From the Verge of Suicide to a Life of Purpose and Joy. He'll be back in 2 weeks on February 15th. Next week, we're going to have Jack Perconte on, MLB player from 1980 to 1986 with the Los Angeles Dodgers, Cleveland Indians, Seattle Mariners, and Chicago White Sox, and the author of 4 sports books. Dear listener, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Good night, everybody. Thanks again, Mr. James Donaldson.
All right. Good night.